Drake Tungsten in the Galactic Hunger. Written by adipose-rex. Find more of their work on deviant-art.com and visit patreon.com/adipose-rex. Join at a certain tier and get access to even more stories. Join the private Discord and talk to the author and other fans of weight gain and expansion literature. Well, it looks like the evil Emperor Zarxon won't be bothering the Galactic Federation anytime soon. So said Drake Tungsten, space rogue of the cosmos, piloting his astroship, the Star Master, away from the planet Arrael 5, the latest home base of his diabolical adversary, as it exploded in a burst of plasma-infused magma. Now to get Princess Akina back home. Oh, Drake, you were amazing! The nubile Princess Akina gushed, throwing her arms around the broad chest, broad shoulders and broad neck of the adventurous adventurer. I always am, Princess, Drake said, leaning back and flashing a photo-worthy smile. This reminds me of the time I was captured by King Yayawa from the Raylos system. He had bred an army of super-sentient, super-large protozoa with a taste for human blood, and he was going to... Captain, I'm picking up an object. In a minute, Steve 2. Drake cut off the nebbish technician, who really should know better than to interrupt his leader when he's in the middle of wooing a rescued princess. So King Yayawa had these giant vampire bacteria, and he had sent them after me after tying me down to a dull-witted Trandersnit, a beast so stupid it habitually tries to mate with thorny bramble shoots that only grow in the middle of arid deserts. They weigh 5 tons and move by trying to swim through solid ground, and I was shackled to it by neutron-forged chains, so I wasn't just going to cut it my way free. Suddenly, our stalwart hero's anecdote was cut short by the sound of an explosion and the Star Master lurching violently. Steve 1, what just happened? Drake demanded his number 2. We've been hit, sir. Stabilizers have lost power. The team's stoic co-pilot was rapidly trying to bring the damaged parts back online and to stop the ship's turbulence. Suddenly, abruptly, everything went still. Well done, Steve 1. It wasn't me, sir. There's a new problem. We've been caught in a tractor beam. We're being pulled down to a small asteroid. Reroute power to thrusters. Reverse speed. No good, Captain. Steve 2, whose real name was Frank, interjected. Our system's been taken over. We're locked out. But Drake Tungsten didn't defeat the 501 Shadow Demons of Shadow Mountain and the neighboring Shadow suburbs by giving up just because everything had turned against him. Tank! Drake called into the comlink down to the engine room. Is there anything you can do on your end? Tank the tank, Havisham responded. No good, Captain. Our fuel cells were hit in that blast. The engines are practically dead. Blast! Drake slapped the control panel in frustration. Maybe if we... But Drake didn't have a chance to finish his thoughts as the ship touched down on the asteroid, hard. But our heroic adventurer was quickly to his feet. All right, people, we need to move fast. Steve 1, get down to the blast door and stand guard. Steve 2, take the Princess Akina to the quarters and try not to get in our way. Tank, he said, as the engineer muscle of the team came into the cabin. Tank, go back up Steve 1. I'm going to grab my vibro chainsaw gun sword, and then we're going to investigate this rock. But even as the spacefaring swashbuckler was giving commands, a group of tiny flying droids was infiltrating the downed ship and seeking out the passengers. Right as the crew was ready to leave the cockpit, the droids flew in and began filling the cabin with a powerful sleeping agent. One by one, the crew members fell asleep, until even Drake himself fell victim to one of his few weaknesses. He needed oxygen to live. Sometime later, the crew of the Star Master came back to the land of being awake and alert, groggy but none the worse for wear. As the last bits of influence from the sleep agent fell away, Drake looked around and discovered something distressing. Princess Akina has been taken. Again? Steve 2 said under his breath. Faithful crew, we must rescue her at once. The thought of a fragile beauty such as hers being in the grasp of whatever deadly vile force shot us down is almost more than I can bear. To arms. Let us go forth and embark on another noble quest. The crew suited up for an excursion possible battle, then assembled outside the ship. The asteroid was uniformly bleak and featureless, save for some jagged mountains rising up from the red dust ground. And also, save for the only structure in sight, a large building in the distance that looked, from where they were, like a temple of some sort. Well, at least we're spared any lengthy search, Steve 1 said. Right, the only place they can be. Drake concurred. All right, men, let's move out, but be on your guard. It took the better part of an hour to reach the temple as the group moved cautiously and kept watch in all directions, wary of a surprise attack. The temple turned out to be much larger than they had thought, grander even than the famed royal quarters of Queen Liston, one of the vainest and most avaricious rulers in galactic history. The temple was fashioned out of the same rust-red rock as the asteroid, but reinforced and decorated with slick onyx and polished brass. 2 large fire pits burned on either side of the large walkway leading up to the front entrance. The flames reflected in the brass finish of the temple, giving the whole building an infernal appearance. As far as foreboding keeps went, this was a solid 7 on the ominous meter. The entrance, curiously, was not guarded, and the large doors merely ornamental. Smaller, regular doors off the side allowed the team to enter. Inside, there was a similarly suspicious lack of guards or beings of any kind. Yet, a glance around the cavernous hallway made it clear the temple was occupied. Torches burned along the wall, and the floor was swept free of the omnipresent red dust. "I have a not-too-good feeling about this, Captain," Steve 1 said. "Look at that. What is that?" Tank said, pointing up at a large painting along the back wall. "It's a mural," Steve 2 answered. "But what is it, some big wrinkly orb?" Tank said. The crew walked down the hallway, and Tank's assessment of the picture appeared apt. It was a painting of a large, wrinkled pink blob with streams of swirling rainbows leading from the edges of the picture to a point at the top of the circle. "Interesting, but not our concern," Drake said. "We need to find the princess." As large as the temple was, it was designed very simplistically. The crew found that by following the main hallway, made apparent by being much larger than any offshoots they found, they were led to the center of the building, a large open room with the ceiling removed. Up above, a small red sun lit the sky a dull blood red. But it was down below that attracted the crew's attention. In the center was a big mass similar to the painting they had seen back at the entrance, but with less wrinkles and a dusky hue rather than a pink coloring. A large tube hung from a statue of a man holding a giant gourd down into the wobbling mound. Assembled in front of it were dozens of chubby people, bowing to the ground except for one obese man in vestments standing between them and the mass. "The time is almost here, brothers and sisters. The time of ascension is upon us. Oh, what honor we enjoy! What privilege has been given to us that we would live to see this day? That we would awaken she who will consume all?" "Cultists," Steve 1 said, the crew of the Star Master sneaking behind a conveniently located pillar. "Haven't dealt with any like them in a while." "What the hell is he talking about?" Drake asked, irritated. He preferred foes who were unabashedly evil and planning to do harmful things to innocent women and children. It made it easier to justify punching them and blowing up their planets. Arguing over theology just gave him a headache. "Who's this she?" It was Steve 2 who figured it out. "That's her." He pointed at the large mass, growing perceptibly bigger. "It's Princess Akina." "What?" Drake and the rest of the crew looked at the immense body again, really looking at it, and they saw Steve 2 was right. The telltale tattoo along her right upper arm sealed it. "What have they done to her?" Drake asked. Then, as he stepped out from behind the pillar, he yelled, "What have you done to her?" The cultists all turned around as Drake strode manly up to them, their shock turning quickly to anger. "An intruder! A blasphemer! Unclean! What have you done to the formerly nubile Princess Akina?" Drake demanded again, walking right up to the crowd of zealots. "Insolent fool! The small, waifish creature you once knew is gone," the head priest declared. "You are in the presence of the coming great fat one, even now on the threshold of rising to true goddesshood. Show respect for the avatar of hunger eternal." "What are you talking about?" Drake yelled, growing angrier by the second. "For millennia, we, the Church of the Appetite, have waited for and sought out the woman of prophecy, the one who would have the ability to consume all and grow to proportions vaster than even the universe itself. One of the great fat ones, those sacred few who can—" "Shut up! I hate when you religious freaks start talking about your beliefs. Roar!" And Drake began punching cultists indiscriminately. As the rest of the Star Master crew came to join their captain, the head priest cried out, "Clerics, defend the goddess!" As the rest of the cultists scattered, the open arena began filling with dozens and then hundreds of cyborg monkey clerics, clad in battle robes and armed with electric stun staffs. Within seconds, Drake and his fellow adventurers were surrounded. "Well, crew, looks like we got ourselves a Donnybrook." Oh, and what a Donnybrook it was, dear readers. Fists and metal and bullets and fur and teeth were flying everywhere in an orgy of violence. But the outcome was never in doubt, for where there is a fight, Drake Tungsten will walk away victorious. "And now, weird fat cleric guy," Drake said, advancing on the portly head priest, We'll be taking the Princess Akina and leaving. Our fearless hero walked up to the even larger Princess Akina, her weight incalculable, her form vanished into many tons of adipose. Raised a couple dozen feet by her boulder-sized butt, her face was out of sight, forcing Drake to climb onto her enormous belly and climb up to her. Gah! This is like climbing the giant pillows of Encia 5, the planet of giant pillows. Finally, he crested her hilly breasts and saw the familiar but fleshier face of the fair princess. Her lips were fastened around the end of the hose, descending from the statue, and she was greedily sucking whatever fattening concoction it fed her as if it were the first sustenance she had had in a fortnight. All right, princess. I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but we're going to get you home. Drake tried to pull the tube out of the piggy princess' mouth, but found it clenched firmly between her teeth. Pulling harder, he managed to get it out, but before he could start figuring out how they were going to move the immobile royalty, his attention was grabbed by a loud and growing louder rumbling that, he realized, was coming from deep inside Princess Akina. The princess commanded, and then her mouth began inhaling with the ferocity of countless vacuum cleaners. Drake only managed to roll out of the way of the collapsing statue, which looked like it was about to crush the princess, but instead compacted and squeezed into a thin stream directed right at the princess's mouth. As Drake hit the ground, only the base of the statue was left, but he could see the top of the walls of the open-air court bending inward before chunks began breaking off and flying towards her. Behind him, the head priest jumped to his feet and held his hands up in worship. Go, newly born goddess, go and consume. Eat it all, devour all, eat. Captain! Steve 1 yelled over the sound of Princess Akina's feasting. I think we should leave. That would be prudent. Drake was already running back to his crew, and then he continued past them and back to the door they had come through. Oh, goddess! They heard the head priest shout as they left the court. We give ourselves to you, the first of the countless who will serve your hunger. The crew of the Star Master ran full speed out of the temple, getting out shortly before they heard the outer walls break apart and fly into what was once the fair Princess Akina. Ma! 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 The being of pure hunger and appetite demanded. Above and around them, the large red mountains went the way of the temple, breaking off into streams of matter flying towards Akina. As the crew reached the Star Master, a problem occurred. Captain, Tank said, the fuel cells were damaged in that hit. We won't have enough power to get out of here. We just need to get off this rock before she eats us all, Drake answered. I'd rather risk floating out in space, hoping to get picked up than to stay here and be devoured. The crew got to their stations and started their pre-flight operations. Atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed. Drake started the pre-flight countdown, hurrying as fast as he dared. The ground beneath the ship began to shake. The asteroid is breaking up, Steve 2 cried. Lift off! Drake hit the thrusters and the Star Master, improbably, began to lift off. And not a moment too soon, so behind them, Akina had grown so large and was pulling in so much matter that the asteroid was being torn apart by her gravity and hunger. The Star Master, being pushed to all its limits, struggled to break free of Akina's growing gravitational force. Slowly, ever so slowly, it rose up, paying for each feet of lift with countless joules of energy. But then, things grew bleak. Its ascent slowed, then stopped, and the Star Master, despite its rockets burning at full capacity, hung there motionless. Zero momentum, Captain, Steve 2 said. Wait, we're starting to move back down. Increase power, Drake cried. Tank, give us everything you've got. It's no good, Captain. The power, we don't have it. Oh, this looks like the end, dear readers. Can Drake Tungsten get out of this? Will he save his crew from certain death yet again? Will he save the Princess Akina from her insatiable hunger? No. The Star Master's backward fall continued to grow faster, and within seconds, the rockets finally died out, all the ship's power gone. Finally, the Star Master and its crew became part of Akina's seemingly endless meal. King Walena's heart was heavy. His only daughter, Akina, had been kidnapped by the evil Emperor Zarxon, sworn enemy of the Galactic Federation a week ago, and still there had been no word Drake Tungsten who had vowed to rescue her. Usually, it only took him a day or two, 3 at the most, before he returned with the perpetually abducted princess. But now, with a full 7 days past, King Walena had feared the worst. The princess's habit of being kidnapped had finally proven her end, and some unknown but terrible fate had befallen her and the galaxy's greatest hero. Oh, and there was a giant blob that had appeared in the Gamma Delta quadrant, and all the stars and planets in that area had been disappearing while the giant blob grew larger. That was pretty bad as well. "My liege, urgent news!" One of the king's servants burst into his quarters as the disheartened king pined for his daughter's return. "What is it, man? Has my daughter been found?" "Well, yes, sire, but there is an issue." "I don't care. Take me to her." The king jumped to his feet, hoping that the princess was at this moment landing on the castle's pad. But instead of leading the king out of his room, the servant strolled to the window and pointed up at the sky. The large blob was even larger now, taking up a third of the sky and growing fast. "We've discovered that's your daughter. Your security forces verified her biosignature before they were, eaten." Just then, the queen came into the room. "Husband, I have just learned—" "Yes, my dear. It seems our daughter has become some kind of monster, devouring everything in her path." The sky was now completely filled with the flesh of the former Princess Akina. King, queen, and servant, as well as everyone else on the waking side of the planet, looked up at their imminent demise, an apocalypse no culture native to the planet had ever considered before. And as the first pools of Akina's hunger began warping the planet, tearing it to bits and squeezing everything into a stream of food for the growing girl, the queen turned to her husband and got in one last word after a marriage full of them. "I told you to buy her that pony when she was 5. And Akina ate everything and ascended to the ranks of the great fat ones, her story imprinting itself on the minds of those sensitive to the hunger in other universes. The ones she didn't eat first. The end.